The diner sat on the corner of Highway 16, right where the railroad split the white side of town from the black side. Its red neon sign flickered between Cafe and AF. To most folks in Millstone Creek, it was just another roadside stop, a place to grab coffee before sunrise or gossip before sundown. But for Renee Carter, it was survival. Before we start the story, if this is your first time on Top Core, welcome. Here, we tell real American stories. Stories that make you feel, think, and remember what it means to be human. So hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. That night, the rain came down like it wanted to wash the whole town away. The windows rattled and thunder cracked across the sky. Inside, Renee wiped down tables, her eyes drifting to the old radio on the counter, where the local news droned about a coming storm warning. A white couple sat in the booth by the door whispering. The man's voice cut through the sound of rain. "You'd think by now they'd move this place somewhere else," he muttered. His wife gave him a quiet nod, staring out the window, pretending she didn't hear her husband's words. Renee heard. She always did. But she didn't react. She'd learned that silence was safer than confrontation. Behind the counter, a framed photo hung slightly crooked. Her father in an old army uniform. The glass was cracked across his face, but she'd never replaced it. He was the reason she kept the diner running. He was the reason she stayed in a town that never wanted her here. Just then, the door swung open and cold air rushed in. Standing there was Sheriff Cole Branton, the man who once arrested her in front of half the town. The room went still. The couple stopped whispering. Even the old ceiling fan seemed to slow down. Cole shook off his hat, water dripping from his jacket. His eyes met Renee's for a brief second. That same look of uneasy recognition they'd shared for 10 long years. He looked older now. Lines cut deeper into his face, and his badge caught the light like it was mocking him. "Coffee," he said flatly, placing a $5 bill on the counter. Renee poured the cup and slid it toward him without a word. "You still running this place alone?" he asked. She nodded, her tone even. "Always have." He sipped the coffee, his hands trembling slightly. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was guilt. Nobody knew, and Renee didn't care to ask. The sheriff stared at the photo behind her. "That your daddy?" She didn't answer right away. "Yeah," she finally said. "He served in Vietnam." "Good man?" Renee's lips pressed together. "The best I ever knew." The radio crackled, interrupting the silence. A dispatcher's voice broke through the static. "All units, we've got a vehicle stranded on Route 49 near Miller Bridge. Possible family inside. Roads are flooding fast." Cole stood up, finishing his coffee in one swallow. "That's me," he muttered. "Families trapped in the flood zone." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "You stay off the roads tonight. It's getting ugly out there." Renee looked out at the rain pounding against the glass. "I'll be fine, Sheriff." He nodded once, pulling his hat low. When he opened the door, wind and rain rushed in again, blowing out the diner's neon flicker. Renee watched him drive off into the storm until his taillights disappeared into darkness. She tried to shake off the feeling that something bad was coming. She'd seen that storm before, not just in the sky, but in people, in her town, in her own memories. When the power went out 10 minutes later, she lit a candle and stood by the window. Lightning flashed across the road, and for a moment, she saw her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, strong face, holding back years of anger she'd never had the luxury to release. The rain kept falling, harder and harder, until the sound of thunder was replaced by the distant wail of a siren, one that suddenly stopped. Renee turned off the radio, frozen. She felt something deep in her gut, something pulling her toward the door. She grabbed her keys and whispered to herself, "Not again, Lord. Not again." Then she stepped into the storm. The wind whipped through the trees, bending them like they were bowing to the storm. Renee's truck bounced on the muddy road as water splashed over the windshield. She could barely see the yellow lines anymore. Her heart raced as she passed the sheriff's office. Lights off, nobody inside. Every sensible thought told her to turn back. But she couldn't, not after hearing that siren cut short. A mile up the road, she spotted flashing red and blue lights half submerged underwater. Sheriff Cole's cruiser had slammed into the guardrail, one side crushed, the other buried in the rising flood. Renee pulled over, grabbed her flashlight, and ran toward the wreck. Her boots sank into the mud, rain slicing across her face. She heard nothing but the storm and her own breath. "Sheriff, you hear me?" she shouted. A faint groan answered from inside the car. Cole was pinned behind the wheel, his leg trapped. His eyes fluttered open, disbelief flickering across his face when he saw her. "Renee," he rasped. "What in God's name?" "Save it," she said, pulling on the door handle. It wouldn't budge. "You're bleeding. We gotta move. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you." She grabbed a rock from the road and smashed the window. Rain poured into the car. Cole winced as glass cut his arm. Renee reached through, unbuckling his seatbelt, her hands trembling but steady. With all her strength, she pulled him out. The water was rising fast, up to her knees, then her waist. Cole gasped in pain. "Can't walk," he said through clenched teeth. Renee threw his arm over her shoulder. "Then you'll lean." Before we proceed, please let us know in the comment box where in the world you are watching from. It helps us appreciate you. Thanks. Renee's lips pressed together. "The best I ever knew." The radio crackled, interrupting the silence. A dispatcher's voice broke through the static. "All units, we've got a vehicle stranded on Route 49 near Miller Bridge. Possible family inside. Roads are flooding fast." Cole stood up, finishing his coffee in one swallow. "That's me," he muttered. "Family's trapped in the flood zone." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "You stay off the roads tonight. It's getting ugly out there." Renee looked out at the rain pounding against the glass. "I'll be fine, Sheriff." He nodded once, pulling his hat low. When he opened the door, wind and rain rushed in again, blowing out the diner's neon flicker. Renee watched him drive off into the storm until his taillights disappeared into darkness. She tried to shake off the feeling that something bad was coming. She'd seen that storm before, not just in the sky but in people, in her town, in her own memories. When the power went out 10 minutes later, she lit a candle and stood by the window. Lightning flashed across the road, and for a moment, she saw her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, strong face, holding back years of anger she'd never had the luxury to release. The rain kept falling, harder and harder, until the sound of thunder was replaced by the distant wail of a siren, one that suddenly stopped. Renee turned off the radio, frozen. She felt something deep in her gut, something pulling her toward the door. She grabbed her keys and whispered to herself, "Not again, Lord. Not again." Then she stepped into the storm. The wind whipped through the trees, bending them like they were bowing to the storm. Renee's truck bounced on the muddy road as water splashed over the windshield. She could barely see the yellow lines anymore. Her heart raced as she passed the sheriff's office. Lights off, nobody inside. Every sensible thought told her to turn back. But she couldn't, not after hearing that siren cut short. A mile up the road, she spotted flashing red and blue lights half submerged underwater. Sheriff Cole's cruiser had slammed into the guardrail, one side crushed, the other buried in the rising flood. Renee pulled over, grabbed her flashlight, and ran toward the wreck. Her boots sank into the mud, rain slicing across her face. She heard nothing but the storm and her own breath. "Sheriff, you hear me?" she shouted. A faint groan answered from inside the car. Cole was pinned behind the wheel, his leg trapped. His eyes fluttered open, disbelief flickering across his face when he saw her. "Renee?" he rasped. "What in God's name?" "Save it," she said, pulling on the door handle. It wouldn't budge. "You're bleeding. We gotta move. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you." She grabbed a rock from the road and smashed the window. Rain poured into the car. Cole winced as glass cut his arm. Renee reached through, unbuckling his seatbelt, her hands trembling but steady. With all her strength, she pulled him out. The water was rising fast, up to her knees, then her waist. Cole gasped in pain. "Can't walk," he said through clenched teeth. Renee threw his arm over her shoulder. "Then you'll lean." They stumbled toward the truck, lightning flashing behind them. Every step was a battle. By the time they reached the road, both were soaked and shivering. Renee got him into the passenger seat, turned the key, and prayed the engine would start. It coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. "Hospital?" she asked. Cole looked at her, dazed. "Roads are blocked, closest one's over the bridge." Renee looked out at the flooded highway. The bridge was gone, swallowed by the river. She exhaled hard. "Then you're coming with me." They drove in silence, the truck shaking under the wind. Cole pressed a rag to his bleeding head, his breath shallow. "You could have left me there," he said quietly. Renee's hands tightened on the wheel. "That's not who I am." The storm roared louder, drowning out their thoughts. When they reached her home, a small wooden house on a hill, she pulled him inside and laid him on the couch. For the first time in 10 years, the woman he once called a criminal was saving his life. Cole stared up at the ceiling, his breath uneven. "Why'd you do it?" he whispered. Renee wrung out her wet hair, her voice steady. "Because I don't want your blood on my conscience. That's enough to carry already." He didn't reply. But in his eyes, somewhere between pain and shame, something had cracked. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm had trapped them under the same roof, and neither of them was ready for what that would bring. The storm howled outside like it was alive, slamming against the windows, rattling the old house until the walls seemed to breathe. The power had gone out hours ago. The only light came from a few flickering candles Renee had placed on the coffee table beside the couch where Sheriff Cole lay, his leg bandaged with strips of her bedsheet. His uniform was torn, his badge half bent. The man who once stood tall as Millstone Creek's law was now pale, trembling and helpless. Renee sat across the room, hands clasped, watching the flames dance. Her mind drifted back to that day, the day Cole humiliated her in front of everyone. 10 years ago, she'd been pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. Cole had ordered her out of her car, searched it, found nothing, but still dragged her to the ground because, as he said, people like you always got something to hide. She'd never forgotten the sting of gravel on her cheek, the way the crowd watched but said nothing. She was the daughter of a decorated soldier, yet in that moment, she was treated like nothing more than a suspect. Now, that same man was lying under her roof, bleeding on her couch. "You should drink some water," she said finally, her tone cool but calm. Cole tried to sit up but winced in pain. "I didn't expect you to." "No, you didn't," she cut in. "You never do." He swallowed hard, guilt flickering across his face. "I was doing my job back then." Renee's eyes met his, steady. "Your job? Or your prejudice?" He looked away, the silence cutting through the room like a blade. The rain softened to a steady rhythm. Cole leaned back, eyes glassy. "You think I hate you, don't you?" Renee gave a dry laugh. "You don't have to hate someone to destroy 'em, Sheriff. You just have to believe you're better than them." Her words hung heavy in the air. Then from outside came a loud crash, like something hitting the side of the house. Both of them froze. Renee grabbed the flashlight and peered through the window. Branches littered the yard, but in the distance, down by the road, she saw something. Headlights, half sunk in water. Another car. She turned back to Cole. Someone else might be trapped. He shook his head weakly. "You can't go out there again, Renee. It's suicide." But she was already pulling on her coat. "You're in no position to give orders." As she stepped into the rain, Cole shouted after her, his voice hoarse. "You're risking your life for people who wouldn't do the same for you." Who exactly was your father? He asked slowly. Renee didn't answer. She just opened the door and stepped into the rain again, shotgun in hand. Cole tried to get up, but the pain in his leg stopped him cold. Renee, you don't know what's out there. She looked back at him. That's where you're wrong. Then she disappeared into the darkness. Down the road, the water had started to recede. The sheriff's office sat in ruins. Half the roof caved in, debris floating everywhere. Renee's flashlight beam cut through the mist as she stepped over a broken sign that once read, Law. Order. Justice. A man stumbled out from behind a patrol car, soaking wet, his face bruised. He froze when he saw the shotgun aimed at him. Don't shoot, please, I didn't do nothing. Renee lowered the gun slightly. Who are you? Name's Toby. They locked me up last night. Said I stole gas from a farm. Renee's heart twisted. She remembered him. A quiet man who worked at the hardware store, always polite. Where's the deputy? She asked. Toby's face went pale. He didn't make it. Roof caved in. I tried to help him, but then that gun went off. Renee's stomach dropped. You need to get somewhere safe, go up the hill to my place. But Toby shook his head. Ain't nobody safe, ma'am, not tonight. He pointed down the flooded road. Couple others broke out, angry. Said they were going to find the sheriff and make him pay. Her pulse quickened. How long ago? Not long. 10 minutes, maybe. She didn't wait another second. She turned and ran, mud splashing under her boots, flashlight bouncing wildly. Every shadow looked alive. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Back at the house, Cole was struggling to load his sidearm, sweat dripping down his face. He could hear something moving outside, crunching through the wet gravel. The door burst open. Renee rushed in, breathless. They're coming. Cole's jaw tightened. Who? Ex-inmates. Flood took down the cells. They think you left them to die. Cole cursed under his breath. Hell, maybe they're right. Renee grabbed extra shells, loading the Remington with a steady rhythm. We don't have time for guilt. We stand our ground. The mother and child huddled in the corner, silent tears streaking their faces. Cole took a deep breath, forcing himself upright despite the pain. You're not fighting this alone. She gave him a sharp look. You can't even walk. Then I'll shoot from the window. Their eyes met. Two people on opposite sides of history, now forced to fight the same enemy. Outside, the rain eased to a drizzle. The night grew too quiet. Then came the first shout. Sheriff Branton, you still alive in there? A voice, low, angry, close. Cole's grip tightened on his gun. Renee moved beside the door, shotgun raised. The voices drew nearer. And as the candlelight flickered across their faces, the sheriff realized something that made his blood run cold. The people coming for him weren't strangers. They were men he'd arrested, men whose lives he'd destroyed. The night outside was black and heavy, the storm finally quiet. Too quiet. Every drop that hit the tin roof sounded louder now, sharper. Renee stood by the front window, her shotgun steady, eyes locked on the muddy road that led to her front porch. Cole sat near the doorway, pistol ready, pain shooting through his leg like fire. From the distance came muffled voices, men arguing, boots sloshing in the wet dirt. I see the sheriff's car, one voice shouted. Lights in the house, he's in there. Cole cursed under his breath. They found us. Renee didn't flinch. She clicked the safety off her shotgun and whispered, Let them come. The mother and her child were huddled behind the counter, terrified. Renee glanced back at them, her voice calm and low. Stay quiet. Don't move unless I tell you. Cole looked at her, really looked. The calm in her eyes wasn't fearlessness. It was experience. It was someone who had faced danger before and survived it. You've done this before, he muttered. She didn't answer. Outside, flashlights cut through the darkness. The front gate creaked open. Cole shouted, You don't want to do this. Put your weapons down. The men ignored him. One of them yelled back, "You think you can cage us and walk free, Sheriff? Not tonight." A window shattered. A brick rolled across the floor. The mother screamed, clutching her son. Renee ducked low, raising her shotgun. "Get down!" she yelled. The front door burst open. Two men rushed in, soaked and angry, carrying bats and a rusted rifle. The first man swung at Renee. She sidestepped, slammed the butt of her shotgun into his chest, and kicked the second man's leg out from under him. Cole fired once, and the bullet hit the wall just inches from the intruder's head. "Drop it," he roared. They backed away, eyes wide. The power in his voice, even injured, still carried authority. But before they could retreat, another voice came from outside. A voice Cole recognized instantly. Deputy Hank Miller. "Sheriff, you in there?" Cole froze, his gut twisted. Hank stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, smirking through the doorway. "Heard you got yourself some company." His eyes flicked to Renee. "Ain't this a cozy little picture? The sheriff and the woman he locked up." Renee didn't move, her shotgun still raised. "You sent them here?" Hank shrugged. "They just needed a little encouragement." Cole's jaw tightened. "Hank, lower your weapon." But Hank grinned wider. "Why? So you can keep playing hero to folks who'd spit on your badge?" Renee spoke coldly. "You're not here to save him. You're here to finish what your kind started." Hank aimed his rifle at her chest. "You talk real bold for someone who don't belong here." The silence in that room was suffocating. Rain dripped through the broken window, each drop echoing like a countdown. Then, thunder cracked again. Renee moved first. She fired once. The shotgun blast shattered the air, sending Hank's hat flying as he dove for cover. Cole shouted her name, but it was too late. The rest of the men charged forward. Bullets tore through the siding. Glass shattered. The child screamed. Renee pulled the mother and boy behind the counter, shielding them with her body. Cole dragged himself toward the window, returning fire despite the pain. It was chaos, a storm of gunfire and shouts and fear. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence again. Hank's voice broke through the quiet. "You'll regret that shot, Carter." Renee's hands trembled slightly as she reloaded, her jaw set tight. "I already do." When the headlights disappeared down the road, Cole slumped against the wall, breathing hard. "He's going to tell the whole town you tried to kill him." Renee nodded, her voice flat. "They already think I'm the villain. Now they'll just have proof." Cole looked at her, eyes heavy with guilt. "Renee, I'm sorry. For all of it." She met his gaze. "Sorry doesn't stop bullets." Outside, the wind carried Hank's laughter, cold, distant, fading into the night. And Renee knew something for certain now. The real storm hadn't ended. It had only changed shape. The morning came gray and heavy. The sky looked bruised, the air thick with mud and smoke from burned trees. Renee stood by the diner window, staring at the cracked "open" sign that still hung crooked from last night's gunfight. Her hands shook as she poured coffee, but her mind was miles away, replaying every second of the raid, every scream, every bullet. Cole sat at one of the booths, his leg wrapped again, his badge sitting on the table between them. It looked small now, powerless. "They'll come for you," Renee said quietly. He didn't look up. "I know. And for me." He nodded again. The diner was empty except for them. The mother and her child had left before dawn, heading to relatives up north. The road was clear now, but the air still smelled of fear. Cole took a slow sip of coffee, then set the cup down. "Renee, last night, you handled that shotgun like you've done it all your life." She turned to him. "Maybe I have. Your father teach you that?" Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "He taught me to fight for what's right, even when the world's against you." Cole leaned forward. Who was he really? Renee hesitated. Then, without a word, She reached under the counter and pulled out a small metal box. She placed it gently on the table. "This belonged to him," she said. Inside was a neatly folded military jacket worn and faded with age, a name stitched above the pocket, S. Sergeant David Carter. Cole froze. His breath caught. "Carter." Renee nodded slowly. "My father." He reached out, tracing the letters with shaking fingers. "I know this name." She watched him, her expression unreadable. "You should." Cole looked up, confusion written across his face. "Why?" Renee leaned forward, her voice low, trembling with emotion. "Because your father owed his life to mine." Silence filled the room. "My daddy saved him in Vietnam," she continued. "Pulled him out of a burning jeep when ambush fire came down. They said he was a hero, but when they came home, everything changed." Cole's chest tightened. "What happened?" Renee's eyes glistened. "Your father killed mine." The words hit him like a gunshot. He just stared at her, unable to speak. "They got into an argument one night. Your father called him a traitor for marrying my mother. Said a black man had no place saving a white one. Daddy tried to walk away, but your father shot him. The army covered it up. My mama ran with me before they could bury the truth." Cole's voice cracked. "Renee, that can't be true." But she pulled out an old photo. 2 soldiers, arms around each other, smiling. On the back, Hank Branton David Carter, 1971. Cole's stomach dropped. That was his father. There was no denying it. He slumped back in his seat, eyes wide, mouth dry. "My whole life," he whispered, "I thought my father was a hero." Renee's tone turned cold. "Heroes don't hide murder." The sound of rain started again, soft and steady. Cole looked down at his badge. The symbol of everything he thought he stood for now felt like poison in his hands. He pushed it toward her. "You should have this." She frowned. "Why?" "Because you've shown more courage than I ever did wearing it." She stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "Courage isn't what saves you. It's what costs you." Just as she spoke those words, a truck engine roared outside. Tires crunched on gravel. Renee looked through the blinds and froze. 2 sheriff's vehicles, 4 deputies, and standing in front of them, Hank Miller. He raised a megaphone. "Renee Carter, step out with your hands where we can see 'em." Cole's blood ran cold. Renee turned to him. "You said they'd come for you." He swallowed hard. "Looks like they're coming for both of us." The storm had finally passed, leaving Millstone Creek drenched and trembling. Streets were littered with fallen branches, and the distant hum of generators filled the air. But nothing compared to the tension in Renee's small home. Through the blinds she saw them. Deputies standing rigidly outside, guns drawn. And there at the center, Hank Miller's face was painted with a twisted sense of triumph. Cole's hand trembled on the table. "This is bad. Hank's using every ounce of authority to corner us." Renee didn't flinch. "Then we make him think twice before he acts." The mother and child were tucked into a corner again, silent and terrified. Cole looked at Renee, his respect growing. "You're fearless." "I'm careful," she corrected. "Fearless gets you killed." Hank raised his megaphone again. "Renee Carter, come out or we start breaking things." Cole felt a rage building inside him, not just at Hank, but at the years of injustice, of blind loyalty to a broken system. He glanced at Renee. "Maybe it's time I step in." She shook her head. "Not yet. Let me handle this. You'll make it worse if you go out there now." Cole swallowed hard. He wanted to argue, wanted to insist, but he knew she was right. Renee stepped to the door slowly, shotgun raised. "Hank," she said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of authority he had never respected in her before. "This ends tonight." Hank smirked. "It already ended, sweetheart. You can't hide behind your little diner forever." Renee's gaze hardened. "No, it's starting now. Suddenly, she fired a warning shot just over their heads. Gravel flew and the deputies ducked instinctively. Cole watched Hank's eyes widen for the first time in years. He realized he had underestimated her. "Move back!" she shouted. Hank snarled, stepping forward, but Renee wasn't done. She slammed the butt of her shotgun against the porch railing, creating a shockwave of noise that echoed through the night. Inside, Cole's pulse raced. He saw the fear in Hank's men. Fear of her, of someone who had nothing left to lose. But Hank's face was unreadable, controlled, dangerous. "You're making a mistake," Hank said, voice low. Renee leaned forward. "You already made your mistakes, Hank. Every day you chose hate over justice." Then, suddenly, one of the deputies tripped on the mud outside and fell hard. The rifle discharged accidentally, a deafening shot that made the mother scream. Cole lunged forward instinctively. "Everyone calm down." Renee's eyes flicked to him. "This is your moment, Sheriff. Choose who you are." Cole's throat tightened. For the first time, he saw what it meant to truly take a stand. Not for the badge, not for tradition, but for truth and courage. He rose slowly, pain shooting through his leg, and stepped onto the porch. "Hank," he said, voice firm. "Step away from the people." Hank laughed bitterly. You're weak. Always were. Why should I listen?" Cole took a deep breath. "Because I'm done being blind. You're done hiding behind your authority, and you will answer for every wrong you've done." Renee lowered the shotgun slightly, letting him handle the confrontation. Hank's smirk faltered, the first crack in his armor. But before anything else could happen, headlights appeared from the far end of the street, a convoy of sheriff vehicles, reinforcements arriving. Hank's men panicked. Renee grabbed Cole's arm. "Now's our chance." They moved inside, barricading the door. Outside, the reinforcements shouted commands, confusion spreading among the deputies. Hank's expression darkened. "This isn't over, Carter. Sheriff Branton, you'll regret this." Cole looked at Renee. For the first time, he saw not just the woman who saved him, but the woman who had been wronged for decades. And in that look, a silent promise passed between them. Justice would finally be served. The night ended in uneasy quiet. The storm may have passed, but the real storm, the one of truth and revenge, was just beginning. Dawn broke gray over Millstone Creek. The streets were empty, waterlogged, and silent. But inside Renee's diner, tension thickened the air. Cole was seated at the counter, his leg propped on a chair, bandages fresh, eyes tired but alert. Renee moved quietly behind the counter, preparing coffee, her mind already running through the events of the night. "You did good last night," Cole said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I did what I had to." "You saved me," he pressed, softer this time. She turned, eyes meeting his. "That doesn't erase the past, Sheriff." Cole swallowed. He wanted to apologize, wanted to explain the guilt that had haunted him for years, but words felt meaningless. Then she placed the old metal box on the counter again. Cole's curiosity flickered. "Still hiding something?" he asked. She hesitated, then slowly, deliberately, she opened it. Inside lay letters, faded photographs, a folded military uniform with the name David Carter stitched carefully across the chest. Cole froze. The weight of the revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. "Your father?" he asked cautiously. Renee nodded. "He saved your father in Vietnam. Then your father killed him when he got home, and the army covered it up." Cole's hands trembled as he reached for the uniform. The blood drained from his face. That's impossible." "Check the dates," she said softly. "Everything lines up." Cole studied the letters, every word a dagger. His mind reeled. The man he had admired, the man he had tried to emulate, was a murderer. His whole identity, his pride, the badge he had worn for years, all shattered in a moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, voice barely audible. Renee's eyes glimmered with tears. "Because you need to know who I really am, and you need to decide what kind of man you want to be." The room fell silent. The coffee percolator hissed, the storm outside gone, leaving only the cold light of morning. Cole felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Not just as sheriff, not just as a man of the law, but as a man who had to face the sins of his family, the town, and himself. Then the door banged open. Hank Miller stepped inside, soaked, furious. "So this is it?" he spat. "You finally meet your match, Sheriff?" Cole stood slowly, eyes fierce. "Hank, it ends today. Not with bullets, not with lies, but with the truth." Hank sneered. "Truth doesn't win in this town. You know that." Renee stepped beside Cole, shotgun resting on her shoulder. "Maybe it does when the right people finally stand together." Hank froze. For the first time, the arrogance in his eyes faltered. "You think this little act of heroism makes you untouchable?" he hissed. Renee tilted her head, calm and unshakable. "I don't need to be untouchable. I just need to be alive, and make sure justice finally gets heard." The tension was electric. Every breath, every second stretched like a wire. Outside, the town began to stir. Word of the night's events would spread quickly, and the walls of silence that had protected decades of injustice were starting to crumble. Cole realized something, a truth that shook him to his core. The woman he had once judged, the woman he had arrested and humiliated, was more courageous than anyone he had ever known. And she just saved his life, and not once but twice. The night ended in uneasy quiet. The storm may have passed, but the real storm, the one of truth and revenge, was just beginning. Dawn broke gray over Millstone Creek. The streets were empty, waterlogged, and silent, but inside Renee's diner, tension thickened the air. Cole was seated at the counter, his leg propped on a chair, bandages fresh, eyes tired but alert. Renee moved quietly behind the counter, preparing coffee, her mind already running through the events of the night. "You did good last night," Cole said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I did what I had to." "You saved me," he pressed, softer this time. She turned, eyes meeting his. "That doesn't erase the past, Sheriff." Cole swallowed. He wanted to apologize, wanted to explain the guilt that had haunted him for years. But words felt meaningless. Then she placed the old metal box on the counter again. Cole's curiosity flickered. "Still hiding something?" he asked. She hesitated. Then slowly, deliberately, she opened it. Inside lay letters, faded photographs, a folded military uniform with the name David Carter stitched carefully across the chest. Cole froze. The weight of the revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. "Your father?" he asked cautiously. Renee nodded. "He saved your father in Vietnam. Then your father killed him when he got home. And the army covered it up." Cole's hands trembled as he reached for the uniform. The blood drained from his face. That's impossible." "Check the dates," she said softly. "Everything lines up." Cole studied the letters, every word a dagger. His mind reeled. The man he had admired, the man he had tried to emulate, was a murderer. His whole identity, his pride, the badge he had worn for years, all shattered in a moment. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked, voice barely audible. Renee's eyes glimmered with tears. "Because you need to know who I really am, and you need to decide what kind of man you want to be." The room fell silent. The coffee percolator hissed, the storm outside gone, leaving only the cold light of morning. Cole felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. Not just as sheriff, not just as a man of the law, but as a man who had to face the sins of his family, the town, and himself. Then, the door banged open. Hank Miller stepped inside, soaked, furious. "So this is it?" he spat. "You finally meet your match, Sheriff?" Cole stood slowly, eyes fierce. "Hank, it ends today. Not with bullets, not with lies, but with the truth." Hank sneered. Truth doesn't win in this town. You know that. Renee stepped beside Cole, shotgun resting on her shoulder. Maybe it does when the right people finally stand together. Hank froze. For the first time, the arrogance in his eyes faltered. You think this little act of heroism makes you untouchable? He hissed. Renee tilted her head, calm and unshakable. I don't need to be untouchable. I just need to be alive and make sure justice finally gets heard. The tension was electric. Every breath, every second stretched like a wire. Outside, the town began to stir. Word of the night's events would spread quickly, and the walls of silence that had protected decades of injustice were starting to crumble. Cole realized something, a truth that shook him to his core. The woman he had once judged, the woman he had arrested and humiliated, was more courageous than anyone he had ever known. And she just saved his life, and not once but twice. Hank's shadow loomed closer, but Renee didn't flinch. Cole didn't flinch. Together they stood, the weight of history pressing down on them, ready for the final reckoning. Word spreads fast in Millstone Creek. By mid-morning, the streets are buzzing with whispers, pointing fingers, and judgmental stares. The storm has left debris, but it's the storm of rumors and racial prejudice that hits Renee harder. At the diner, Renee closes the windows, pulling the blinds tight. Cole limps to the counter, rubbing his forehead. They're talking about you, he says quietly, saying you kidnapped me, drugged me. Renee doesn't flinch. They'll say whatever protects their own. Doesn't make it true. But the town... Cole's voice falters. They won't see it your way. Not yet. Outside, a crowd begins to gather. People she has known all her life, some friends, some enemies, congregate near the roadside, shouting, taking sides. Signs of hate are already surfacing. Graffiti on the diner's walls, slurs scrawled across the windows. Renee feels the weight of decades of injustice crushing her chest. She glances at the metal box, the one containing her father's military jacket, and the letters that prove his heroism and the betrayal. She knows the truth must come out, but revealing it will ignite Millstone Creek. Cole leans against the counter. You don't have to face this alone. Let me help. She studies him. His words are genuine, but she sees the internal battle raging in his eyes. He's torn between the law he represents, his family's past, and the person he wants to be. Suddenly, Deputy Hank Miller storms into the diner, flanked by two deputies. Step aside, Carter, he sneers. Sheriff says you're coming with us. You're causing chaos in this town. Renee's hands instinctively tighten around the shotgun. Cole steps in front of her. You're not taking her. Hank laughs, bitter and loud. You think you can stop me? Cole's jaw clenches. He's been a man of authority his whole life, but now authority feels meaningless. This is about truth, justice, and redemption, not the badge. Step outside, Cole says slowly. We'll settle this without blood. Hank grins and signals the deputies, but before they can move, a loud roar of engines shakes the street. Trucks, motorcycles, and locals who respect Renee, some veterans, some townspeople who remember her father's heroism, surround the diner. Renee's eyes widen. Cole looks stunned. You didn't call them, he asks. She shakes her head. I never had to. Hank's face turns red with anger. He realizes he's outnumbered. The power he wielded for years is slipping through his fingers. You can't do this, he shouts. Renee steps forward. Watch me. The crowd outside begins chanting, not in hate, but in support. Voices carrying the story of her courage, the truth of her family, and the injustice she has endured. Hank hesitates. This is more than he anticipated. He knows the truth will come out, and for once the law won't protect him. The tension builds. Everyone in the diner feels it. The turning point has arrived. Cole, Renee whispers. Are you ready to finally tell the truth? Cole swallows hard, nodding slowly. He knows this will cost him everything, his badge, his home, his reputation. But staying silent isn't an option anymore. Outside, Hank's phone buzzes, more whispers of the town joining Renee's side. He glares, realizing that the past, buried in lies and fear, is finally catching up. Renee and Cole standing side by side at the diner's door, ready to face the crowd, their united front a challenge to decades of prejudice and deceit. The sun rises over Millstone Creek, casting a pale light over the shattered remnants of the storm. The town is awake, and the news of Renee saving Cole, revealing her father's past and standing against Hank has spread like wildfire. A crowd gathers in front of the diner. Some are curious, some angry, but many are allies, people who believe in justice and truth. Cole steps forward, his badge in hand, heart heavy. "Everyone," he begins, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "It's time you know what really happened." Gasps ripple through the crowd as he recounts the story. The Vietnam mission, the bravery of David Carter, his unjust death at the hands of Hank Branton, and the cover-up that the town had accepted for decades. Renee watches quietly beside him, her hand resting on the shotgun, a symbol of both protection and defiance. She doesn't speak yet. She lets the story breathe, let the town feel the weight of its lies. Hank Miller's face twists with anger and disbelief. He starts shouting, trying to interrupt, but the crowd's attention has shifted. People are listening. They see the courage of a black woman who defied decades of systemic hate. Cole continues, admitting his family's guilt, his father's crimes, and his own blindness. "I failed to see the truth. I failed Renee Carter. And I'm here to make it right, even if it cost me everything." The silence is heavy. Then slowly, whispers turn into applause, hesitant at first, then louder, louder, until the energy of justice fills the street. Renee finally speaks. "This town has taught me pain, hatred, and fear. But it has also taught me that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about standing up, even when the odds are against you." Hank's face contorts with rage, but even his allies start stepping back. He realizes he's lost not just the moral battle, but the social one as well. Cole turns to Renee. "You saved my life, more than once. And now, you're saving this town from its own lies." She meets his gaze, eyes unwavering. "We're saving it together." A tense confrontation. Hank raises his hand as if to strike, but a former soldier from the crowd steps forward, blocking him. The sheriff steps forward, standing tall, not as a man of law, but as a man of conscience. Hank's fury is palpable, but the town, finally awake, begins to rise against the injustice. The camera would linger on Renee's determined face, Cole's remorseful eyes, and the crowd's shifting loyalty, a visual tableau of redemption, courage, and justice. Outside, the sun breaks through the clouds. The storm has passed. The real storm, the storm of truth, has changed everything. The town of Millstone Creek was restless. Rumors spread like wildfire, mixing outrage, curiosity, and admiration. Renee could feel the tension from the moment she stepped outside her diner. Every glance, every whisper, carried judgment and speculation. Cole followed her silently, his pride and guilt warring inside him. He had exposed the truth, admitted his family's sins, and yet, the town's reaction was unpredictable. Friends, neighbors, and strangers alike had opinions, and many weren't kind. Hank Miller prowled in the background, gathering allies, plotting a retaliation. His fury wasn't just about the truth. It was about losing control, about seeing a black woman rise above the system he had exploited for years. Inside the diner, Renee sorted through letters and mementos from her father's past. Each one carried a story of bravery and betrayal, and every line reminded her of the life she had almost lost. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're carrying more than anyone should. Are you sure you want to face this town?" She looked at him, her eyes sharp. "I have no choice. If I don't face them, the story dies, and my father's sacrifice dies with it." The local church bell rang in the distance, echoing through Millstone Creek. Groups of people started gathering in the square, some supportive, some hostile. Among them were descendants of families who had once opposed Renee's father, their eyes cold and suspicious. Renee felt her pulse quicken. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. This confrontation wasn't just about her life or her father's legacy. It was about the town acknowledging decades of lies and injustice. Hank's fists clenched, his face red. "You think everyone will believe you?" Renee met his gaze without flinching. "I don't care who believes me. I care that the truth is out." At that moment, a small group of veterans from the community stepped forward, nodding toward Renee. "We remember David Carter," one of them said firmly. "He saved lives. This town owes him respect." The crowd shifted uneasily. Momentum was building, but danger still lurked in Hank's anger. Tension boiled over as the town square became a battlefield of words, anger, and history. Cole tried to mediate, but even his calm authority couldn't contain the rising emotions. Hank Miller pointed to Renee and Cole. "You've both lied, manipulated. You're rewriting history to suit yourselves." Renee's voice cut through the noise. "I'm not rewriting anything. I'm showing you what really happened. My father saved lives, including your father's, Sheriff Branton. Then he was betrayed. That is the truth." Cole felt the weight of decades pressing on him. His family's pride, the town's reputation, and the badge he had worn all seemed meaningless in the face of what was right. Hank's supporters pushed forward, trying to intimidate the crowd. Some people started shouting, others backing away. Chaos teetered on the edge. Then, a young woman from the crowd, a teacher who had once been a student of Renee's mother, stepped forward. "We've been taught lies for generations, but bravery and justice don't come with skin color. Renee Carter proved that last night." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, others stared in disbelief. The town was split, but cracks were appearing in the wall of hate. Hank's anger grew. He pointed a finger at Cole. "You're supposed to uphold the law, Sheriff, and now you're siding with her?" Cole met his gaze steadily. "The law is meaningless if it protects lies and injustice. I'm siding with truth." Hank's jaw tightened. He knew the confrontation was approaching a breaking point. He could see the crowd questioning his authority, the veterans standing silently behind Renee, and Cole, once a man of tradition, standing firmly by her side. Renee stepped closer to Cole. "We can't let fear rule us." "Not anymore." Cole nodded, a mixture of resolve and fear on his face. He had chosen a path few could follow, but he knew it was the only one that mattered. Hank's expression faltered. He realized the tide was turning. The legacy of lies, intimidation, and prejudice was being confronted in full daylight. Then, a sudden noise erupted from the edge of the square, a vehicle skidding on wet asphalt. Everyone looked, alarmed. It was a delivery truck, sliding dangerously toward the crowd. Instinctively, Renee sprinted forward, pulling Cole out of harm's way. The truck came to a halt inches from their feet. Hearts raced, adrenaline surged, and the town collectively held its breath. Cole looked at Renee, awe and fear mingling in his eyes. "You saved us again." She shook her head, voice quiet but firm. "I just did what had to be done." Hank stepped back, the reality hitting him. Control was slipping, power was gone, and truth was unstoppable. The town had seen courage, honesty, and bravery in action. And for the first time, many realized the walls of hate could be dismantled, one truth at a time. Tension remained, stakes remained high, and Millstone Creek would never be the same. Hank Miller didn't take the loss lightly. By morning, he was scheming, his mind calculating every way to strike back at Renee and Cole. Millstone Creek's gossip had already spread. Whispers of betrayal, rumors of deceit, accusations mixing with admiration for Renee's courage. But Hank was determined to flip the narrative. Renee cleaned up the diner quietly, but she could feel the eyes of the town burning through the walls. Cole sat at a booth, nursing his bruises and reflecting on his choices. "We've shaken the town," he said quietly. "Now we have to hold it together before it collapses." Before Renee could respond, a loud banging came from the back door. A group of Hank's supporters, armed with baseball bats and spray paint cans, pushed in. They shouted, calling Renee names, accusing her of manipulation. Cole leapt up. "Get out of here!" His voice boomed, authority mixed with desperation. Renee stepped in front of him. "We don't fight with fists, Cole. Not tonight." But the tension was explosive. One man lunged at the counter, swinging a bat, and Renee instinctively grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher, blocking him. The noise, the chaos. It felt like Millstone Creek itself was holding its breath. "This town isn't ready for truth," Hank sneered from the doorway, "and neither are you." Renee's eyes flashed. "Then we'll make them ready." Outside, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered, sensing the impending conflict. They could see the divide, some siding with Hank, blinded by fear and tradition, others starting to understand the courage it took to stand up for what's right. Cole stepped forward, placing himself between Renee and the intruders. "Enough," he said, voice steady. "You want to test me? Test your morals, your loyalty. But no one is leaving this diner hurt tonight." Hank's smirk faded, replaced with cold calculation. He motioned for his group to retreat, but left with a warning that echoed through the storm-drenched streets. "This isn't over, not by a long shot." Renee closed the diner door, locking it carefully. Her hands trembled, adrenaline still rushing. "He'll try again," she said softly. Cole nodded. "And we'll be ready. Together." The quiet that followed was fragile. Outside, the first rays of sunlight struggled through the clouds, casting a gray pallor over the town. Millstone Creek was tense, watching, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. Inside, Renee opened the metal box again, staring at the letters and her father's jacket. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders, but she felt Cole's hand on hers, a silent promise of solidarity. They both knew the town's reckoning was only beginning. Hank wasn't done, and Millstone Creek had yet to confront the full truth of its past. That night, the town seemed quiet, but Renee could feel it, the tension like a low hum, vibrating through the streets. Cole stayed close, checking windows, listening for any sign of Hank's retaliation. Suddenly, a call came through Cole's radio. "Disturbance at Cedar Lane," the dispatcher said. "Possible property damage." Cole and Renee exchanged a glance. Without waiting, they jumped into his truck, racing through the rain-slicked streets. At Cedar Lane, they found broken windows, overturned trash cans, and the unmistakable graffiti targeting Renee. "Liar," and "Truth hurts." Hank's mark, clear, deliberate, meant to intimidate. Renee knelt, inspecting the damage. "He wants fear. He wants us to retreat." Cole nodded. "Then we don't. Not now. Not ever." As they stood, a figure emerged from the shadows. One of Hank's loyal deputies. He lunged at Cole, but Renee reacted instantly, using a quick defensive move she had learned from years of volunteering in self-defense classes. The deputy fell, stunned. "We can't stop every attack physically," Renee said, breathing heavily. "We have to win hearts and minds." Cole studied her, realizing something he hadn't admitted before. Her strength wasn't just in fighting, it was in strategy, in patience, in resilience. She had survived the system and was teaching him how to survive with honor. Meanwhile, Hank watched from a distance, his fury mounting. He realized that brute force would not win him the town's loyalty anymore. Renee and Cole's alliance had changed the game. Back at the diner, Cole and Renee strategized. "We need the truth to go beyond these streets," Cole said. "People must understand the full story. My father, your father, the lies, the cover-ups." Renee nodded. "We'll use the press. We'll use the veterans who remember my father. We'll force the town to face itself." "And Hank?" Cole asked. She didn't flinch. "He'll be exposed. Everyone will see him for what he is." The next morning, they began reaching out to journalists, local veterans, and former town officials. Stories, letters, and old photos were gathered, creating an undeniable record. Millstone Creek would finally be forced to confront its past. But even as they worked, the tension never fully dissipated. Hank Miller's shadow still lingered, his hatred still potent. The town's fault lines were visible in every stare, every whisper, every hesitant handshake. Renee placed a hand on Cole's arm. "We're close. The reckoning is coming. Are you ready?" Cole's jaw tightened. "I've never been more ready." The storm wasn't just outside anymore. It was in the hearts of the town, in the weight of the secrets, in the confrontation between past and present. Every choice from here on would decide not just their futures, but the soul of Millstone Creek itself. The town of Millstone Creek was no longer quiet. Every street corner carried whispers, half disbelief, half outrage. Hank Miller's frustration boiled over. He had underestimated Renee and Cole, and he was determined to strike where it hurt most. Renee opened the diner that morning, only to find the front door partially pried open. The locks had been tampered with. Her heart raced. This wasn't just intimidation, it was a warning. Cole arrived moments later, noticing the damage immediately. "Hank's trying to provoke you," he said, eyes scanning the surrounding streets. "He wants a reaction." Renee nodded, keeping her calm, though inside her pulse was racing. "Then we don't give it to him, not yet." Inside, she gathered documents and photos that chronicled her father's heroism and the long-hidden betrayal. These materials were her shield, her weapon, and her proof. Cole moved to help, but Renee stopped him. "This is my fight. You're my ally, yes, but I need to control how this unfolds." Meanwhile, Hank moved through the shadows, whispering to local officials and old friends of the Branton family. He began spreading half-truths and rumors, claiming Renee had manipulated Cole for personal gain, that her story was fabricated. By afternoon, some townspeople had begun questioning her motives. A few of her acquaintances whispered doubts in the diner, making her wonder if fear or prejudice could still override truth. Cole remained steadfast. "We have history, but we're not defined by what they think," he said, his voice low but firm. "We move forward, together." Then came the first major betrayal. One of Cole's trusted deputies, influenced by Hank's lies, reported Renee's activities to the county officials, suggesting she had endangered the sheriff during the storm rescue. The accusation was false, but it carried weight. Renee's hand shook as she read the report. "This isn't just about me anymore. It's about exposing Hank before more lies take root." Cole put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll handle it. Calm, step by step." But calm was fragile. That evening, a small fire broke out near the diner's back alley. Not enough to destroy the building, but enough to terrify and intimidate. The smell of smoke cut through the air, and Renee knew it was no accident. Hank's presence was everywhere, even when unseen. His message was clear: retreat or face worse consequences. Renee looked at Cole. "This town has never seen me fight for what's right. Maybe it's time they do." Cole nodded. "And maybe it's time they see you as the hero you are." The night closed in with tension crackling in the air. Every shadow, every step on the streets, felt loaded with danger. Millstone Creek was no longer just a town. It was a battlefield of morality, history, and justice. The next morning, the town awoke to the aftermath of the fire scare. Parents whispered to children, neighbors locked doors, and suspicion ran rampant. Hank Miller's influence was spreading like wildfire, and Renee knew he wouldn't stop until he regained control. Inside the diner, Renee and Cole reviewed their options. "We can't wait for him to make the next move," Cole said. "We have to take initiative, show the town the truth ourselves." Renee nodded, a plan forming in her mind. She decided to gather the veterans who remembered her father, documenting their testimonies. Cole contacted journalists he trusted, creating a network ready to broadcast the facts to the public. Hank, growing impatient, decided to escalate. He called in reinforcements from surrounding towns, deputies who were loyal to him, ready to intimidate Renee and Cole into submission. That afternoon, Renee was delivering supplies to a local shelter when she saw them, uniformed men patrolling the streets, blocking access to key areas. It was clear they were testing her limits, pushing her to react. Renee didn't flinch. She met Cole's eyes over the crowd. "We stick to the plan. No rash moves." Cole nodded. "Step by step. Show them courage, not anger." But the crowd wasn't patient. Hank's men tried to provoke them, shoving people and shouting insults. Tension flared, almost tipping into violence. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from the main street. A car had skidded into a utility pole, an accident, but the timing made it seem orchestrated. Hank's presence was invisible, yet palpable. Fear gnawed at the edges of the crowd, but Renee remained steady, her calm presence a counterbalance to the chaos. She addressed the townspeople, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "I'm not your enemy. Neither is the sheriff. The enemy is lies and fear, and the sooner we confront them, the sooner we heal this town." Some nodded, inspired. Others, influenced by Hank, scoffed. But slowly the truth began to seep through. The bravery of her father, the injustice done, the courage required to face hatred openly. Hank, observing from the shadows, realized that brute intimidation wasn't enough. His power over Millstone Creek was waning. Every lie he had spread was being countered by facts, witnesses, and courage. Renee's determination, Cole's admission of past mistakes, and the veterans' testimonies created a ripple effect. People began questioning, reconsidering, and shifting loyalties. That night, Renee returned to the diner exhausted but resolute. Cole joined her, sitting quietly as they reviewed what had been accomplished. The storm outside had cleared, but a different kind of storm had been unleashed in Millstone Creek, one that would force Hank to make a choice and one that would test the courage of everyone involved. Renee's eyes rested on the metal box, the last of her father's belongings. "The hardest part isn't proving the truth," she said softly. "It's surviving the resistance." Cole squeezed her hand. "And we will. Together." Even as the night deepened, the tension lingered. Millstone Creek would not forget this confrontation, and neither would Hank. The lines were drawn, and history was demanding its reckoning. Millstone Creek had changed. The town was awake now, awake to the lies, the betrayals, and the courage it had long ignored. But awakening brought chaos. Fearful whispers filled streets, and allegiances shifted like sand. Renee moved through the diner with quiet determination, rallying the veterans and townspeople who had chosen truth over fear. "We're not here to fight anyone," she said. "We're here to show what real courage looks like." Cole stood nearby, keeping watch. The sheriff's badge no longer defined him. His moral compass did. He had chosen to confront the past rather than protect it, and every step he took beside Renee carried that weight. Hank Miller, cornered by growing opposition, resorted to bold, reckless moves. He began sabotaging community events, threatening small businesses, and spreading lies about Renee's motives. His anger wasn't just about control, it was about pride, ego, and fear of being exposed. That afternoon, an urgent call came in. A local school had been vandalized with messages targeting Renee and Cole. Children were frightened, parents outraged. The town's pulse quickened, teetering on the edge of panic. Renee and Cole arrived to assess the damage. Renee knelt beside the shattered windows, tracing the graffiti with her fingers. "He wants us to react with fear," she whispered. "We can't. Not now." Cole nodded, feeling the truth of her words deep in his chest. "He's losing control. That's our chance to turn this around." The tension escalated when a crowd gathered in the town square, divided between supporters of truth and defenders of old prejudices. Voices clashed, accusations flew, and the air seemed charged with danger. Renee stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "This isn't about revenge. It's about justice. For my father, for our town, for every life silenced by lies." The crowd listened, a mix of fear and curiosity in their eyes. Some nodded, others remained skeptical. But one thing was clear. Millstone Creek could no longer ignore the truth. Hank, lurking at the edge, clenched his fists. He realized brute force and intimidation would not win this battle. The reckoning had begun, and it was unstoppable. Night fell over Millstone Creek, casting long shadows across streets still humming with tension. Renee and Cole knew this was the moment they could no longer delay confrontation. They had gathered all evidence, witnesses, and support. But the town's anger and fear were palpable. Inside the diner, Renee reviewed letters, photos, and documents from her father's military service. Each piece told a story of bravery and betrayal. Cole watched her, understanding fully now that this wasn't just a fight for justice. It was a fight for the town's soul. Suddenly, a loud commotion erupted outside. Hank Miller and a group of loyalists had arrived, blocking the street. His eyes burned with fury, his mouth twisted in a sneer. "This ends tonight," he shouted. Renee stepped forward, calm but resolute. "No, Hank. This ends when the truth is told." Cole joined her. "The lies end tonight. No more hiding. No more fear." Hank's group advanced, threatening, trying to provoke a reaction. But Renee and Cole stood their ground, backed by veterans and townspeople who had grown weary of silence. "You've spent years controlling this town with lies and intimidation," Renee shouted, her voice echoing through the square. "Now we expose what you've done, and it's over." Hank's face twisted in disbelief and rage. He lunged forward, but the veteran stepped in, holding him back. Cole approached calmly. "Step down, Hank. You're out of time." Tense silence fell. The townspeople watched, some cheering quietly, some uncertain, but the power had shifted. Renee seized the moment. She told the full story, her father's heroism, his murder by Cole's father, the cover-up, and her decade-long struggle. The crowd listened, stunned. Faces turned pale, eyes widened. Shock, disbelief, and eventually respect began to take root. Hank's anger finally broke into fury. He shouted accusations, tried to shift blame, but it fell on deaf ears. The town had seen courage, truth, and resilience. Cole stepped forward, voice steady, confronting his own family's sins. "I can't undo what my father did, but I can make sure the truth is known, and I can stand with those who fight for justice, not cover-ups." The crowd murmured, tension still high, but slowly the atmosphere began to shift. The fear that had ruled Millstone Creek for generations was being replaced by awareness, uncomfortable but real. Renee and Cole looked at each other, exhausted but resolute. They had faced the town's resistance, Hank's fury, and decades of lies. And now, the reckoning had finally begun. But deep down, both knew that this confrontation was only the start. Millstone Creek would never be the same, and neither would they. The town square of Millstone Creek was eerily quiet that night. A tense stillness had settled over the streets, broken only by distant raindrops and the murmurs of the crowd that had gathered to witness the confrontation. Hank Miller, now fully aware that his grip on the town was slipping, stepped forward, fury blazing in his eyes. "This ends now," he spat, glaring at Renee. "You think you can turn everyone against me?" Renee stood her ground, unwavering. "It's not about me, Hank. It's about the truth. Your lies end tonight." Cole stepped beside her, his presence calm, yet authoritative. "Enough, Hank. You've had your chance to make things right. You chose fear over honesty, hatred over courage." Hank's followers whispered nervously among themselves, their confidence faltering. The town had been watching, listening, and the tide was turning. Every rumor Hank had spread was unraveling before their eyes. Hank lunged forward, trying to provoke violence, but a group of veterans, men and women who had served with Renee's father, intercepted him. "Not here, not tonight," one said firmly, blocking his path. Renee's voice cut through the tension, steady and clear. "You don't get to rewrite history. You don't get to decide who deserves respect or justice. The people here will decide for themselves." The crowd, emboldened by her words, began to step forward. forming a barrier between Hank and any further aggression. Children, parents, and longtime townspeople all took positions that mirrored courage over fear. Cole raised his voice. "Hank Miller, your time is over. This town will no longer tolerate lies and intimidation. You've had the opportunity to make amends, and you chose power over truth. The truth is out now, and you cannot stop it." Hank's face twisted with rage, realization, and defeat. He staggered back, unsure of his next move. In that moment, Renee stepped forward, holding a faded military jacket, her father's. The name Branton, stitched inside, glimmered faintly under the streetlights. "Do you recognize this, Hank?" she asked, her voice unwavering. "This is the legacy you tried to bury. This is the life your lies tried to destroy. And yet here I am, standing for what's right." The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps and applause. Hank's power, once absolute, crumbled as the truth was made tangible before everyone. Hank, defeated and isolated, was finally confronted by the townspeople he had sought to control. They demanded accountability, demanding that the sheriff act. Cole stepped forward, shaking his head solemnly. "This isn't about punishment. It's about justice, honesty, and acknowledgement of what happened. You've lost your influence, Hank. It's time to face the consequences." Hank had no words left. His fury had run dry. For the first time, he was powerless in the face of truth, courage, and collective moral awakening. Months had passed since that stormy night. Millstone Creek was no longer the divided, fearful town it had been. The streets carried a new energy, one that mixed acknowledgement, healing, and hope. The memory of Renee's courage, Cole's moral awakening, and the veteran's testimony lingered, leaving an indelible mark. Renee stood quietly at the edge of town, holding her mother's hand. Lila Mae Carter's eyes glistened with pride and relief. "You've carried this for so long," she whispered, "and now the town knows." Cole arrived, dressed in plain clothes, his sheriff's badge long surrendered. He approached slowly, meeting Renee's gaze. "I lost everything to do what's right," he said softly, "but I gained the only thing that matters, my conscience, and the chance to honor your family." Renee smiled faintly. "It wasn't just me, it was all of us. Standing up changes things, but it also demands courage." At the newly erected memorial near the town square, a plaque gleamed in the sunlight. "In honor of Staff Sergeant David Carter, courage, sacrifice, and the truth we must never forget." People from all parts of Millstone Creek gathered, some who had resisted change, others who had fought alongside Renee and Cole. They stood together, acknowledging the past while committing to a better future. Hank Miller had left town quietly, his name now a cautionary tale. No longer could he manipulate fear to control others. The truth had dismantled his authority, proving that courage, honesty, and moral integrity could overcome even the deepest-rooted hatred. Renee looked at Cole. "You see now what it means to confront history?" He nodded, emotion thick in his voice. "Yes. And you've taught me what it means to be human." The town's old prejudices didn't vanish overnight, but cracks appeared in the walls of fear. Conversations shifted, minds began to open, and children grew up seeing courage as the path forward. Renee, standing beside her mother, finally felt the weight of the past lift. The years of silence, fear, and secrecy were over. The storm had passed, leaving Millstone Creek reborn. Scarred, yes, but stronger, wiser, and more just. Cole, observing from the steps of the memorial, realized the full impact of his choices. He had faced the legacy of his father, the hatred embedded in the town, and his own prejudices. And now, he could finally begin to rebuild, not just trust, but humanity itself. Renee whispered to her mother, "Peace isn't given, it's fought for, earned, and shared." Cole, standing a few steps away, spoke softly to himself. "And sometimes it's saved by the people you least expect." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Millstone Creek, the town exhaled collectively. The truth had prevailed. Justice had been acknowledged. Courage had changed lives. And for Renee, Cole, and the people of Millstone Creek, the journey toward healing had only just begun. The story ends not with finality, but with a promise that even in towns steeped in prejudice and fear, the courage of one person can ignite change, transform hearts, and reshape the future. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications if this is your first time at Top Core, because this story will challenge everything you thought you knew about courage, revenge, and secrets hidden in plain sight.